Hello, hello, and welcome. My name is Emily Daisy Gasca, and today I have the honor of interviewing the amazing Briana Morales. And I want to introduce her to you, and I want her to share a little bit about more about who she is, why she's here, and the amazing things that she is doing to impact our future generations. So, without further ado, welcome, Brianna. If you could please share who you are and just let the world know.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Briana Morales. I teach 11th and 12th grade English at Gordon Bush Alternative Center in East St. Louis, District 189, and I am the 2023 Illinois Teacher of the Year. There's been a lot of different pieces that have taken me to and through the moments that led me to becoming a teacher and also really impact my educational philosophy and the other types of things that I do in my life. More importantly than being a teacher, I'm a teacher in the alternative education space. So, many of my students have been expelled from their home schools or sent into an alternative setting for various reasons. And so, I get to work with a lot of different kids with different sets of needs in a smaller environment, which allows me to maximize the impact that we get to have in the 8 hours that I get to see them. Outside of being a teacher, I do lots of different things. I work with pre-service teachers at National Lewis, and I am very proud to be a school board member for the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice's School District 428, which services all of our youth who are currently incarcerated in Illinois, but they are pursuing their education because I deeply believe that all of our children and all of us as adults are worth more than the worst thing that we've ever done. And our youth who are incarcerated deserve an equitable education just like everyone else. So, kind of thinking about my trajectory to get to where I was, things were not always this way. As a kid, I grew up kind of facing a lot of childhood trauma and abuse. And so, for many of our kids, I think a lot of that was exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of our students' home lives outside of school were really highlighted. And so, when I think about my own upbringing, it was the love and compassion of teachers that enabled me to keep going when I felt like sometimes the darkness might have won. And so we know developmentally for middle school students, especially, that is probably one of the most challenging and tumultuous times of their life. That transition from fifth and sixth grade into seventh and eighth grade, so many different changes. And what we know about the middle school brain developmentally is that all of our kids really deeply want to find their purpose. They want to be somebody, but they're not exactly sure who that might be yet. And so, our students in those grade bands specifically, the dedicated care of a loving adult can really change the trajectory of their lives. And so, for me specifically, growing up, again, just like every other 12 and 13-year-old, I was going through overwhelming changes at the time. But on top of that, kind of compounding everything that I had already been through, I was uh, my family was transitioning, and so I was in a blended family with a step parent and my mom. My dad had signed off his rights as my birth father in middle school. And so I kind of just felt like I lost the connection to my birth family. And I didn't really know where there was a place for me in the world anymore because I was then being given to a family that harmed me very deeply. And so in the fall of my seventh grade year, I unfortunately attempted suicide. And I came back to or middle school to the coolest English teacher that I could have ever imagined after I was in psychiatric hospitalization. And I still remember her to this day. She had blonde hair and she had like these really pretty nails. But more importantly than that, she opened a door for expressive writing for kids just like me and also kids not so much like me at all in her class to process their lived experiences through writing and to tell our story. And so the foundation of my educational philosophy is to help my students believe too that you are special, you are unique, you have a place in this world. And it's not on us to empower our students with this sense of purpose. This sense of purpose is already inside of them. It's finding the ways to reveal that to them, just the way that my teacher did for me. And so I wrote my very first poetry book in her class, and I never looked back after that. And so that single act of care that one teacher opened for me in that year changed the rest of my life because I then was on a mission to spread that same message to as many people as possible in my own career later in life. Because Mrs. Steineke at Eisenhower Junior High School in Schaumburg District 54 helped me to truly believe what I now call my own life's purpose as I seek to instill in my students that we can turn our pain into power and that that can reveal our purpose. And so I'm very privileged to be able to get to do the work that I do with my students through community, through trust, through relationships, of telling their stories and figuring out what is special about them that they'd like to share with the world through working through toxic stress and trauma and documenting their lived experiences through spoken word poetry in my own English classroom.
Wow, that is amazing. You said so much, Brianna, that I just really want to let our listeners fully take this in. You I want to ask you, can you really expand on how your past trauma, when you were at the crossroad, that identified your purpose, and what did you do? Because some of us, even adults, we come to these crossroads and we get stuck and we continue in life living these patterns and not realizing, it's because we have to navigate and work through it. And there's actual purpose in the pain that we have to walk through, feel. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, kind of thinking about all of the different dynamics of my life, I think a lot of our students live in through some of the circumstances that are seminal to my life's journey. And so, really thinking about like from the very young age of me being as a kid, I am a white Mexican woman. And so I really felt like throughout school and also throughout various points in my life that I didn't really fit in anywhere. And so, kind of thinking about like that as like an identity factor compounded with all the other life events that I had been through. Many of us throughout our lives feel like we don't fit in anywhere or that maybe our life doesn't have a purpose in the moment. And so it takes these larger events that maybe we encounter to show us that through tragedy, through adversity, through challenges that maybe we might feel are insurmountable at the time, that the process leads us to the product of us being renewed or coming to a new sense of purpose that maybe we couldn't see at the time. And so I don't believe, right, that many things that happen to us in life sometimes they're not our fault and we might not have control over them. But when we choose to do with the pain in our life, it is our responsibility. And so I tell my students that as well, that the things that may have happened to us, it may have been unfair. They may have harmed us in a very deep and profound way. But what we get to do and how we choose to rewrite the story in the aftermath of trauma, in the aftermath of adversity, that then becomes our power because we are rewriting the story. We're telling the narrative. And I think that that's also empowering to anyone, but especially to young people who feel so often that everything in their life is out of their control. You do get to control what the rest of your life looks like in the aftermath. And I think that there's a profound sense of hope for all people in realizing that truth.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you because as you know, I'm creating an ecosystem through this podcast, Chronicles of a Daisy, where I am empowering women, educators, and especially educators who are moms, and cultivating an environment for their families and their students that is filled with love, joy, peace, and patience, even in the midst of the trials and the challenges and the adversity for that same reason. There's purpose, and we can navigate in life feeling and creating and cultivating this environment for our children and for ourselves. What is the one thing you would tell moms out there who may feel overwhelmed, or even teachers who may feel overwhelmed with what the children or the students or the young adults are facing, and they don't know how to help them navigate through that?
I think there's no rule book, especially for being a mom, but also for being a teacher. I think like in the first like 3 to 5 years of our careers, but also as being parents. So we are not really sure how to navigate those early years of our children's development or that of our students when we are in the classroom or in the educational space. And so I think so many times we look for these solutions. What are other people doing with their students? What are other people doing with their children? And what we need to realize is that each of our children, our young people in front of us, are unique in their own way. And sometimes they need different approaches. And so, if there's one thing that I could say, it would be that a lot of this work is extremely messy and it's not cut and dry, right? And so sometimes we're not going to have the right answers, but what is, I think, empowering to young people, no matter their age, and no matter if you are their parent or if you are working alongside them in any other capacity, such as an educator, it is to share in that space with students or with our kids to make space for all of those big emotions, for all of the things that they might be thinking and feeling and navigating, to let them know that sometimes, right, we're not always going to have the answers, but that they're not alone in figuring it out. And so I think, again, kind of thinking back to how I felt and many other people feel growing up as young people, it's that no one ever boldly said, I'm walking with you through this journey and that you don't have to do it alone. And that itself can take the burden off of so many different things and allow us to really focus on how we can persevere through those things. What does resilience look like in the face of those things or the aftermath of those things? But just to really let all of our children know that we've likely walked a similar path as them. And even if we haven't, that we can figure it out together because we can do so much more together than we ever could alone.
Wow. Thank you so much for saying that because that right there is going to free so many people. I think that as teachers and even as moms, like you said, we look for a manual, we look for a curriculum, we look for a framework that's going to be tell us exactly what to do, what to say, and how to. But the reality is we have to cater to the needs of each individual child. And that's where the transformation happens. So I love how you truly ex 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 how you truly expanded on that and shared why it's important to let them know that we are walking with them and that most importantly, they are not alone. I love that. Thank you. So as we continue on, Brianna, can you share a little bit more about, you're an amazing woman, an amazing teacher, educator, and you are doing so many things to change and transform the lives of our future generations. You have even started your own nonprofit. Can you please share the story behind how this was birthed?
Yeah, so I feel deeply privileged to get to do the work that I do alongside my students because it's not possible without community. We know the community is not built overnight. It takes a dedication to a very specific group of folks over a period of time to build the trust that's necessary for these initiatives that are going to impact people on a community basis. And so, thinking about my trajectory as a teacher, I have spent the past 6 years of my teaching career in East St. Louis, District 189, at the alternative high school, working with some of our most at promise youth. And so, I think one, my credibility as far as being a dedicated person to working with a specific group of kids over time has shown them that they can trust me, that I am dedicated to building partnerships not just with my students and amongst one another, but with their families and with the community. And so that's kind of given me this lens to think about outside of the classroom, because as teachers, we can only do so much within the four walls of our classroom or within our school communities. And as educators, our pillars of the community, what does it look like to forge partnerships directly outside of schools in our communities and providing our youth with resources that they need to thrive outside of school? And so I've been deeply inspired by one of my former students. Her name is Devia Brown. And I call her a scholar activist because that's exactly what she was. I'm very well known as Teacher of the Year for spoken word poetry as a means of healing for students, right? And so my students write at length about their lived experiences growing up. What is their place in the world? How are they resisting against things that they know are not right? What are their dreams and hopes and aspirations for what their community could be in the future? And I think that that's a healing experience in itself to have that outlet to really just share and catalog from their own views. What are they seeing in and around East St. Louis? What is it like to be them from their own mouths so that they can write that narrative themselves? But then again, futurism, dreaming for the future is healing in itself. Even if my community is not maybe what I want it to be right now, dreaming about what it could be in the future has a sense of renewal, not just for our students' mind, but for their spirit. And so, Demaya, she loved to write poetry, and I've reflected so much on kind of her journey. Many of our students in all the alternative ed space they end up staying in alternative ed for quite some years, not because they can't go back to their home schools, but because it's something about the smaller environment and the caring adults in the environment that make them feel like for the first time in their life, despite years of feeling cast aside and maybe undervalued for their unique insights and gifts, that someone took the time to share with them and to make space for them, make them feel like they had a voice that needed to be heard. And so Demaya was one of those kids. She transitioned to our alternative school in the ninth grade, and she actually then ended up graduating from our school in the 12th grade. Our school, again, like I said, our kids get to walk back at their home schools just alongside all of the other students at graduation, which is a beautiful joy that many students in alternative ed outside of East St. Louis may never experience, right? And I think, again, it proves that each of those kids is worth more than the worst thing that they've ever done because they get to go back to their home school and walk alongside those kids. But all of that to say, when Demaya was in our school, she found her voice through poetry. And so, again, thinking about how one caring adult in the life of a child can unlock so many doors to healing, even if we don't know it yet. Um, True learning cannot occur without a relationship with our kids, right? And so Demaya felt empowered to use her voice to catalog again all of her experiences and then know in her heart that sharing that with a broader audience then can help unlock those doors to healing for others because they can find those points of similarity in her story. And so Demaya won our district-wide poetry slam in 2019. She got a trophy that says second place, but I call it first because they let somebody walk on before her who didn't sign up for the competition. And so I really think that that in itself was like the restitution narrative, right? Like these kids were removed from their home schools. They got to go participate back at their home school. And she was only able to win that competition because so many people were moved and touched and inspired by this poem that she wrote called A Place. And it was about what she was seeing in her community on a daily basis. We use a mentor text in my class called Where I'm From by Willie Perdomo, and it is the catalog of a Puerto Rican man's upbringing in New York City. And so he writes about all of these things that he sees in his community, but at the end, he says, despite all of this, my community is still beautiful because, and he shares all of these, points of genius and brilliance in his community that other people might not see. And that's exactly how her poem is. She wrote about many things maybe that deeply affected her in her life that she's seen on a daily basis in East St. Louis. But at the end, she says, and then there's me trying to make a way for herself and trying to be successful. Because she was a teen mom, she had two young boys before she graduated high school. Um, and so I watched her through COVID school, right? She was raising her toddler son and then also preparing to be a mom to her second son. And she walked the stage at graduation just 3 weeks postpartum. And it really just was the pillar to me that she was so uniquely independent. She tried to do everything on her own in such a way that she was raising up her boys to know that like they had everything that they needed to be successful within them, just like she
Mhm.
did. And so kind of thinking about all of her life, she was just such a remarkable young person. And I also think that, alternative ed had a specific place in her life too. We don't meet our students at the times that we do in life or meet any people in life that we do at random times by accident. It's on purpose. And so my assistant superintendent, she actually was Demaya's middle school teacher before Demaya transitioned to alternative school. In recent reflections that we've had with her, she used to share that every day after Demaya would leave her math class in the seventh grade, she would come by Miss Garrett, my assistant superintendent's office, and just look at her and say, "You know what, Miss Garrett, I just don't know if I can go on another day." And so then, right, 2 years later, she transitions into alternative school and she blossoms into this young woman who is so confident about who she is, what her place is in the world, and was dead set on making a difference in her community. Despite everything that she had experienced in life, she wanted to be an agent of change and raise her young children up in the same way. And so I loved her so much, and I'll never regret telling Demaya how much I loved her. In fact, I wish that I told her even more because I'll never be able to tell her again. In December of 2022, a year and a half after Demaya graduated high school, she was involved in a tragic car accident where she lost her life and her two sons survived. And so for me, as an educator, I've lost many students for lots of different reasons. There's a gun violence epidemic in many urban communities across America. And many of my students have lost their lives that way. But for Demaya in that moment, especially because it was just an accident and she had such a bright future ahead of her, I really felt lost. Kind of thinking about what do I do when one of my best girls is not here with me anymore. And I call her like one of my girls, but realistically, what I saw her as and what our relationship was, as I reflect on it, is that um, I was only ever a few years older than her when I was her teacher, and so she was too young or too old, I was too young for her to be like one of my kids, but I really looked at her like one of my younger sisters, and it was the sisterhood that we experienced as 2 women of color trying to find their place in the world that really tethered us together even after graduation. And so I was, suffering so much grief and questioning lots of different things in the aftermath of her passing, but I wanted to do something that could memorialize her in a way that was as true to who we knew her to be as possible, because her 2 young sons were only 2 and 3 years old when she passed away. So that means that they will never have true memories of who their awesome mom was outside of what we tell them about her. And so I want everyone to know who Demaya was because even though she passed away, she also lived. She lived a beautiful life where she knew that she was loved, and the same love that was poured into her as a young person enabled her to have a profound sense of love for her community and the people in it, so that then she could make a positive impact in the world. And so, when I became Illinois Teacher of the Year, that's the very first thing that I said when the Illinois State Board of Education came to my school. When they did the Facebook Live, you can go and look at it. I just said, like, I wish she was here to see it because she was my biggest fear. And that's actually one of the last things that Divine said to me before she passed away. She sent me a message that said, I love you, and I'm so proud of you for never changing. You're going to be blessed very soon. And I was, because I became Illinois Teacher of the Year and I had the opportunity of a lifetime to be on a year-long sabbatical from teaching to travel the state of Illinois. And I also started a nonprofit organization in her memory. And so, Sisterhood of Hope is a 501c3 nonprofit organization with 2 chapters in the state of Illinois and Chicagoland and East St. Louis with the mission to empower girls of color through the community of sisterhood that changes the trajectory of your life. And so we utilize a 3-pronged approach in Demaya's memory where we work with 11th and 12th grade high school girls of color in the state of Illinois. Each of the girls will be paired with an individual mentor, and we meet with the girls every single month around an adapted positive youth development framework specific to the needs of and context in which girls of color develop. So every month we take them through a competency specific to what they need to do to thrive in this world, such as confidence, competence, connection and caring, resilience, resistance, and contribution to your community. And so, the very last prong of our approach in Demaya's memory is a scholarship for young mothers, just like Demaya was, because as much success as she achieved in life, Demaya and so many of our young girls never asked for help, right? And they tried to do everything on their own. And we want young mothers like Demaya to know that a community can help you to achieve so much more than you ever could alone, and that there is more power in community than there is in doing things on our own. And so at the end of the next 6 months, we're bringing all of our girls together for what we are lovingly calling a sister symposium, where the girls will share about what they've learned about sisterhood as a community that can change your life, as well as the impact projects that they will do in their respective communities around those competencies that inspired them. And so we're really looking forward to continuing to meet educators, students, and communities who are going to embrace this idea that sisterhood is a sacred concept. And it's not just for girls like me and Demaya, right? It's for all of our girls. We will never be in front of a young girl who doesn't deserve the gift of sisterhood. And so, kind of thinking about how we turn our pain into power, I believe that this is exactly that. It was so hard to come back after I lost Demaya, and I didn't really know what I would do. But I know that she must know what we're doing now in her memory, and I have to know that she would be proud of the way that we're doing.
Oh my goodness. I love that. I love that so much. And every time I hear it, I'm just like, oh, wow. Brought to just that sadness, but empowered and just celebrate this beautiful life she left a legacy. She has left a legacy. And thank you. Thank you for sharing. I wanted to expand on the how you talked about community, because I think, like you said, me myself, you and I, Brianna, are connected for a reason. Like Brianna and I met via Clubhouse 5 years ago, 4 years ago during the pandemic. Educators would get on and we would just create these rooms. And that's how we connected, Brianna and I. And we started following each other on Instagram, and she was doing amazing things since then. She would, fundraise to be able to provide and give her students care packages, which is amazing. Like, be empowered as you listen to this phenomenal woman, powerful woman in education, to know that we all start somewhere small. And she would go and she would be like, "All right, guys, help me out. Here's my Zelle, here's my Cash App." Like, don't be afraid. I love how bold she is, how she is so like, for her students, she is willing to go beyond her comfort zone, and there is nothing that's gonna stop her. She is going to achieve what she wants because she has her end goal in mind. And that's the beauty of being empowered and letting your pain be your purpose, because that's one of the reasons I started this podcast as well, Brianna. We share that because before I even entered kindergarten, I had already experienced and faced some trauma as well. That it why does it always happen in our home, right? Like, same thing, it happens in your home, and then you have to decide whether you're going to allow that to define you, or you're going to really push beyond that and find your purpose. And it's not easy because I truly didn't walk in that until I was an adult, a young adult. So the fact that you're doing this for so many students and building a community and an ecosystem with Sisterhood, that is truly going to set an example and a framework for other educators and other people to know, like, let's do something to help our our future students, our future generations, because they are in desperate need of help, just like you and I felt like we did not belong. Damaya as well, she did not belong. There's so many educators are there who are right now feeling like we don't fit in. What's happening in education, there's so many shifts and changes that, how do you build a community?
I think, right, like, kind of thinking about, like, how we build community, I think that, we also can also understand that, sometimes people build community only around people that they think that they're connected to or that maybe their identities overlap with, and that's a beautiful thing about the concept that kinda changed the trajectory of my career is Ubuntu. It's the Bantu concept of humanity, which is oftentimes translated as "I am because we are." It's a belief that your humanity is tied to my humanity and that we are more interconnected than we will ever know. And so for that, we are forever indebted to one another, inseparably connected to other people, despite whether or not we might know why, right? And so this idea that we can build community across identity markers, across maybe some of these other things that seek to divide us in life, right? Trying to find or elevate the perspective that really does unite all of us, and that is our community. And so that's really been kind of like a marker of my own career in education. Is I lived a completely different life than many of my students growing up. I grew up in Hoffman Estates. I graduated from Hoffman Estates High School in 2013, and Hoffman Estates and East St. Louis are worlds apart, right? But that doesn't mean that I can't connect. That doesn't mean that I can't seek to understand because there's not always going to be someone who innately understands us or who we are or what we've been through in life. But that doesn't matter. Someone who wants to understand can make all the difference in someone's life. And I encourage everyone to think about that as they seek to build community in their respective areas.
Thank you. So that is key. That is key when building a community. I love how you shared that you don't have to find or think that a community is built based on your similarities. Let's embrace our differences, right? And that's what educators do. I think that in the classroom, that's what we seek to do as well with our students. What are their strengths and how can I help their weaknesses? Thank you so much for sharing that, Brianna. Now, is there any advice that you would give educators today that are kind of stuck and they're feeling burned out and they're feeling overwhelmed and not sure what their purpose in life is?
I think that we've all been there, and I think just the cyclical nature of, just the work that we do. It is sometimes thankless, sometimes, undervalued by other people, but that's why it's important for each of us to really understand, like, our why and reflect on it. I think so often, right? Like that's why all the back to school PDs really focus on that, right? It's like, what is our why? Because at some point in the year, some of us start encountering like self doubt. We start to think about all of the overwhelming parts of maybe our careers that we're thinking this doesn't align with who I am personally. This doesn't align with what my mission is for students. But there's still a way to live your truth despite all of those other things when we focus on what was it that inspired us to join this field and to make a difference for young people. And so I think if there's any piece of advice, this is what I've been telling teachers across the state of Illinois. It's two things actually. It's that a lot of people will tell us as educators that we simply care too much. So many times we get down on ourselves thinking, man, is it just me who only cares so deeply about these kids? Is it just me who cares about East St. Louis or Chicago or Detroit or wherever I am teaching? And the truth about that is, for outside people who may say that we care too much as educators, is that that is just impossible because young people deserve everything that we have and even more than that. The second thing I think that a lot of people love to say in caring professions, this could be doctors, lawyers, social workers, teachers, caregivers, is that our hearts are too soft for the change maybe that we want to be making. We need to accept the reality of the world. And what I say back to that is, you're right. My heart is extremely soft, but that's because the world is hard enough as it is. And I refuse to let it make me the same way because some kid, um, this year, last year, for the next 5 years, and for the rest of our careers in education, and even for children we'll never meet in the next lifetime, deserve and count on that softness because it's the gift that keeps on giving. And some kid needs your gifts, your skills, your talents. And even more importantly than that, they need your unwavering support in pursuit of their best selves, even if they're not sure yet who that might be. And so I encourage all educators to commit to the challenge and the adventure that really is ensuring that all of our young people are not just going to be seen in their work, right? They're going to be known and truly loved for who they are. And we cannot do that for our students unless we first do it for ourselves. And so, again, that's why it's so important to reflect on often and to center ourselves in what our purpose was in this work all those years ago when we started, because sometimes, like the darkness, it will seek to swallow us whole, and we can't allow that to happen if we seek to be those role models to make change for our students.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Brianna. This has been amazing. You have empowered so many women. You have established a ecosystem with sisterhood that is just going to really take off because our girls need that, and I love it. And we honor Damaya and just acknowledge that she has left a legacy. And I thank you for doing what you're doing and seeking the community to continue to do that. And, just thank you so much. And I am so excited to see what the future holds for you because I know that this is just the beginning and you are just getting started. You are going to impact so many lives across the nation and beyond, being also from Mexican background, like you speak Spanish. So you are going to definitely go past those borders beyond the nation into Latin America. So I am so excited to see what the future holds for you. But thank you so much, friend, for doing this. And love you and thank you. And everyone, have an amazing day. And we will be back soon. Talk to you later.